Hola, soy el profe en cuarentena y hoy repaso los básicos de los sustantivos. So today we're going way back to Spanish 1 level, to basic level, for an introduction to Spanish nouns. This is for those students who need a refresher, basically. So we're going to answer the question, what is a noun? What are gender and number? What are some clues to identifying a noun's gender, and what are the rules for making a noun plural? So let's get started. What is a noun? What have you heard? Most people have heard the basic definition, which is a person, place, or thing. A person, place, or thing. This is a fairly good definition, but isn't perfect. What a noun really is defined by its relationship in the sentence, what other parts of the sentence do to it. But, you know, the definition person, place, or thing will really, you know, get you where you need to go at this level if you're not a linguist. So, for example, student is one, a person, place, school, things, book, which is a tangible thing, or a language, which is an intangible thing, something you can't touch. So these are persons, places, things. You also are familiar with proper nouns, which are specific nouns, proper nouns. So in Spanish, we capitalize those like we do in English. There are some differences in rules, like a title of something it's capitalized at the beginning. Only the beginning, not all the words. So, for example, 100 años de soledad. These are specific examples of those general nouns. So, what are the considerations? What do you need to consider when you're thinking about Spanish nouns? Masculine or feminine? Is it masculine or feminine? And is it singular or plural? Though these concepts are obviously related to the ones that we talked about, the number with regard to the verbs, this is clearly different. Nouns are not treated like verbs. Verbs don't have masculine and feminine forms. So let's get started with gender, because in English, we don't have this in a grammatical sense. So we have to ask ourselves with every Spanish noun that we learn, is it masculine or is it feminine? And these are, we'll define them through examples. So libro, marcador, these are two masculine nouns that follow a pattern. All right, a pattern that you were probably aware of before you even started taking Spanish. If it ends with an O, it is a masculine noun. Normally, there are a few exceptions, but that is the marker of masculine. All right, and a lot of other things. We'll talk about adjectives in a future video and articles in a future video. A lot of those things are dictated by whether or not it's masculine or feminine noun. And marcador is also things that in or are masculine most of the time. You can, to a lesser extent, you can say consonants other than D are masculine, but that's a little tricky. When you start making those sorts of rules, then you have to start memorizing exceptions. But you can be pretty comfortable thinking that if you see a noun and it ends in an O or it ends in an OR, you can be fairly comfortable that it's going to be masculine. So you see all of these examples from Spanish 1, abuelo, acento, hermano, hijo, horario, refresco, sobrino. You can see that some of these, like abuelo, like hijo, like hermano, refer to a person, but a lot of these do not. So caballo, a horse, bolígrafo, a pen. There's nothing particularly masculine about those things. It just happens that they end with O, they're conjugated a certain way. Grammatical gender isn't always aligned to our concept of gender. And these are some Spanish 2 verbs that follow that same pattern, those patterns. Now, there are a lot of nouns that don't have clues. There are no clues to whether or not it's masculine or feminine. So, For example, autobús, avión, lugar, maquillaje, menú, tenis. These are they don't have the basic clues that give you the information that they're masculine. So what do you have to do? You have to memorize them. All right. When you're learning a new noun, you always in Spanish, you always have to memorize if it's masculine or feminine, so that you can then use the proper adjectives, so you can use the proper articles. That information is important. So you do have to memorize a new noun's gender every time you learn one. So femenina, una palabra femenina, oftentimes it ends in an A or an IA, like biología. So escuela, biología. There are more patterns, more rules with feminine nouns. So something that ends in ción, computación, por ejemplo. Computación, things that end in D or DAD. Ciudad, things that end in Z, like nariz. Those are most of the time, all of the time in the case of ción, that feminine. So you can see some of the ones that follow the most straightforward patterns. Abuela is the opposite abuelo, right? The feminine version of the masculine version, abuelo. But there are also some like hora, impresora, mañana. Again, printer, hour, tomorrow, or morning. That doesn't have much to do or anything to do with the concept of gender. They end in A, so they're feminine. That's the way that it works. All right, and again, there are some sustantivos femeninos that do not have. Oh, these are the Spanish two versions of the same ones. The ones that end in A, the ones that are simple to know whether or not they're feminine or masculine. These are feminine. There are some, what I was saying before, that don't have any clues. There are more than this, but we haven't learned a whole lot in Spanish 1 and 2, which is what dictates this list. It's the same with the feminine. You have to memorize these. You have to memorize them. And you can. Every time you learn a new noun, just learn that it's masculine or feminine. All right. There are a few that are just completely false clues. All right, they have false clues. Problema is masculine. Programa, tema, planeta, mapa. The ones in that column right there, problema, programa, tema, planeta, mapa, they're all masculine because they came from Greek. Pa, ta, ma. Those endings are often masculine, even though the feminine end in A. That's the rule that you probably knew before you came into Spanish class. And then there's sacapuntas, which lies doubly. It's singular, masculine. Artista, cura. Those two are masculine if you're referring to a guy. So el artista, a guy artist. El cura, a guy priest. So la or artista would be feminine. And then dia, probably the most popular false clue. Dia is el dia, la. There are feminine versions as well. Mano, hand. Foto, moto, radio, testigo. Mano is hand. It was feminine in Latin. Foto, moto, radio are shortened versions of fotografía, motocicleta, and radiodifusión that have been shortened, and we say la foto, la moto, la radio because of that. Testigo is the word for witness. If it's a female witness, it's la testigo, la testigo. Agua is a different case altogether. It's not really, it doesn't have a false clue. You use el in the singular form instead of la, so it won't get mixed up with the beginning of the word lagua. You say el agua. And that goes with a lot of similar nouns that start with A. And you definitely have to memorize these, the false clues. There aren't just a whole lot of them that you'll use in everyday life. So gender, a note on gender. We know gender as male, female, a social construct that we use. It doesn't really have a good connection to that. I mean, we'll talk about that in a second, but you shouldn't get too hung up on that. Vestido, por ejemplo, a dress, something that you often associate with female, probably. Vestido is masculine. And why is it masculine? Because it ends in O, period. That's why. It ends in O, vestido. And a lot of it has to do with how the language evolved from Latin. So there are, however, some cases where when you're referring to a human being, where gender does actually refer to the gender of the person. Alumna, female student. Alumno, male student. Hermana, sister. Hermano, brother. Hija, daughter. Hijo, son. And then those are the ones that are the A endings and the O endings. There are some like profesora, profesor. Right? The masculine ends in R, the feminine ora. Right? Profesor, profesora. And then some that don't have any indication. You just need to know the definition. Mujer, woman. Hombre, man. Madre, mom or mother. Padre, father. So let's talk about number. All right, singular or plural. So when we're thinking about English, you see the regular nature of the language that if you're a native English speaker that you speak. If you were asked, how do you pluralize a noun, you'd probably give the simple definitions. Put an S at the end. All right, put an ES at the end. You can see that that's the case with many nouns. Cat, cats. House, houses. Bus, buses. Tax, taxes. But noun pluralization, making nouns plural, is one of the many irregular points in the English language. You have wolf, wolves. City, cities. Potato, potatoes. Right? Ask Dan Quill about that one. You probably went over your heads there. Google it. Cactus, cacti. Criterion, criteria. And then sheep doesn't even change. Then child, children, tooth, teeth. You can see English is weird. Right? English is weird when it comes to that. There are much more simple rules in Spanish to make a noun plural. Number one, if it ends with a vowel, add an S. Number two, if it ends with a consonant, add ES. And then there are some sub rules for if it ends with a consonant. If it ends with Z, change the Z to a C before adding ES. And then if it ends with ción, you remove the accent before adding ES, which is just a written rule. And that's it. That's how you pluralize nouns. Let's look at some examples. We've got alumnos, alumnas, madres, taxis. All right, if it ends with a vowel, you just add an S. If it ends with a consonant, you add an ES. Marcadores, ciudades, hoteles, lugares. Right? These are many times will be masculine because, as we said, there's sort of a soft rule that if it ends in a consonant that's not a D, it's masculine. So most of these consonant add ES, a lot of times they'll be masculine, not all the time. The ciudades is good. So a couple of examples of nouns that end in Z. This is just a written thing again, something you have to remember when you write Spanish. Nariz, luz, lápiz, all of them are feminine, become, narices with a C, luces with a C, and lápices, nose, light, noses, lights, and pencils. The ción, again, written thing, you just take off the accent mark. or when you're writing it, if you put the es on it. Aplicación, accent mark. Aplicaciones, no accent mark. Look at that screen. Just a side note. What do all of these, or there are some exceptions, but what do most of these end with in English? Aplicación, colaboración, investigación, medicación. T-I-O-N. This is the Spanish version of T-I-O-N. And this is a really rich place for cognates. If it ends in T-I-O-N, you can sort of gamble on that it's going to sound the same. Nation goes to nación. Presentation goes to presentación. So this is a place where you can sort of have a lot of vocabulary just by knowing that rule. And then looking at gender and number together. If you watched the verb video, you got a taste of this before. So if it's a group of just women, if you're talking about just women students, alumnas is what you would use. Or if you were talking about your sisters, hermanas, daughters, hijas, tías, aunts, profesoras, only female teachers. With the looking at the, did I forget to? Yeah, I forgot to pluralize those real quick. Let's. All right. So the point of that, those are only female groups. The second group, however, alumnos, it functions both for a group entirely composed of guys and a group that is a mixed gender group. So alumnos could mean all the students, no matter what gender they are. Alumnos also could be a group of just guys. So again, you can see the stamp of history on this one. It is a masculine dominant language. So alumnos, hermanos, hijos. A lot of times, this, it has some logic to it, the structure. But for example, padres. Padres means dads in theory, but when people say padres, they really mean parents most of the time. So pluralizing to us, pluralizing dads and making it parents, that's where you get, it sort of makes you a little more aware of how strange this is. But it is how the language works, the grammar works that way. So just something to keep in mind. If you're talking about all your teachers, profesores would be what you would use, unless you went to a school or in a schedule where you only have female teachers, in which case you say mis profesores. There are some movements, just like there are in our language, to sort of degenderize it, to take away that sort of less socially acceptable, more progressive mindset that's coming about. But you can see how difficult that would be in the Spanish language. There are a few ideas. Todes, to put the es on the end, to adjust. Instead of saying todos or todas, you'd say todes. Alumnos y alumnas, to clarify when you're talking about groups that are mixed gender by using both. Alumnos, alumnas, instead of just using alumnos as the gender neutral. Or Latin X, this is a popular one. This is not a super helpful one for Spanish speakers, though. This is just an English thing, because you can't pronounce that well. In Latinx, X doesn't have the same flow. Changing language is an extremely slow process, and it usually follows natural courses. But these are some things. You see, language can be social, can be political, often is. So we've talked about Spanish nouns. We've answered the question, what is a noun? A person, place, or thing. Talked about gender and number. You probably knew what those meant, but how do they apply to the Spanish language? Clues, we talked about a few clues about identifying a noun's gender. Remember, you have to memorize that when you learn the noun so that you can use it in a sentence. A lot of things will depend on that. And then the rules, much more simple rules for making a noun plural in Spanish when compared to English. So good job. Hopefully this helped you remember those things you learned in previous classes. Hasta pronto.